Pursuant to order, I now call Senator Cash to make her first speech and ask honourable senators that the usual courtesies be extended to her. I call Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. It is with significant honour that I rise to make my first speech in the Australian Senate. Mr President, I commence my remarks by offering my congratulations to you on your election to the office of President of the Senate. Having watched my father, the Honourable George Cash, in his role as President of the Legislative Council of Western Australia and currently as Deputy President, I have a true appreciation of the roles and responsibilities that befall the President of the Senate, and I wish you well. I extend my congratulations to all senators elected at the 2007 election, in particular those elected for the first time. I also extend my appreciation to the Clerk of the Senate and to his staff for their assistance and advice since my election. As someone who believes in the principles of federalism and in houses of review, I am honoured to have been elected as a Liberal senator for Western Australia. There is no doubt that Western Australians recognise that a critical institutional safeguard for all Australians is a competent and properly functioning Senate, a Senate which scrutinises, criticises and passes judgment on legislation having regard to, in the case of the citizens of my state, the interests of Western Australia. This scrutiny ensures that a federal government located in Canberra, many thousands of kilometres in distance from Western Australia, is still held accountable for its actions that affect the people of my state. Although there is a long history of federalism and federalist thought, Australia's federal system is one of the longest running of the world's current federal systems. Of course, the establishment of the Australian federal system did not happen overnight. During the 1890s, there was considerable debate between representatives of the various colonies considering the merits of establishing an Australian federation. It is well documented that there was considerable reluctance on the part of Western Australia to join the federation. It is also clear from the conference debates that when the Commonwealth was created in 1901, the states proposed to transfer only limited powers and intended to retain the maximum constitutional powers for themselves. 107 years later, it is fair to say that our founding fathers did not envisage that the passage of time, changing circumstances and the broad interpretation of Commonwealth powers by the High Court of Australia would see a profound encroachment by the Commonwealth on previously intended state areas of responsibility. Whilst accepting the changing powers of the Commonwealth due to High Court interpretation, I believe that we, as senators, must always pay proper regard to the constitutional compact as it was originally conceived. Wherever it is consistent with good policy, we should seek to make decisions that, whilst reflecting the national interest, uphold and respect the interests of the states. As former Prime Minister Sir Robert Menzies was heard to say after a fiery and contentious Premiers' conference, "6 state premiers send me up the wall, but I would not have it any other way, because it is our insurance against dictatorship." Mr President, Western Australia, apart from being the largest state, having an area of almost 1/3 of the Australian continent, is a very significant contributor to the national economy. Without question, my state has emerged over the last 2 decades as an economic powerhouse. Western Australia, with about 10% of Australia's population, has historically generated approximately 30% of Australia's export revenues. However, the recent commodities boom has pushed this figure to now exceed 40%. My state generates more export income than New South Wales and Victoria, Australia's 2 most populous states combined. Western Australia has been blessed with an abundance of natural resources. The state's economy is primarily export-driven, with China, Japan, South Korea and India being key export destinations. Last year, Western Australia exported more than $55 billion worth of minerals and petroleum as a result of global demand for our natural resources. The continued rapid industrialisation of China and India is expected to significantly increase the demand for our mineral exports into the future. Mr President, whilst Western Australia is abundant in mineral resources, it offers much more in its economic contribution to the nation. Agricultural exports make up the state's second major export industry. The fishing industry is also important. We have a flourishing shipbuilding industry located at Kwinana, south of Perth, and many other industries of international repute. Mr President, the growth Western Australia is experiencing is providing great benefits and opportunities for our nation. To ensure that we take full advantage of this opportunity and maximise benefits to all Australians, we need a bold and coherent vision and long-range contextual planning to adequately address the infrastructure needs of Western Australia, not just for today, but into the future. As a senator, I want to contribute to the development and implementation of policies that promote the building of infrastructure that is necessary to ensure that my state, and therefore the nation, enjoys continuing prosperity. Western Australia's vast natural resources place it in an enviable position, but much of its economic potential is still to be realised. One of the foremost opportunities will be the further development of the state's mineral resources through increased downstream processing. As government decisions can often impose unnecessary and sometimes unintended burdens on industry, we must make certain that decisions affecting Western Australia's resources industry do not unwittingly affect the capacity of industry to flourish and grow for the benefit of the nation. There is no doubt, in my view, that a failure by the Commonwealth to properly recognise Western Australia's unique needs would be detrimental to the national economy. This would ultimately impact on the capacity of government to deliver essential services and social dividends to all Australians. I am a strong believer in recognising that the development of industry should not be fettered by unnecessary regulation. In my view, a view that has been fashioned by my years of legal practice, every piece of legislation should be subject to rigorous impact analysis. Ideally, this analysis should be published as a formal statement and tabled in Parliament as part of the legislative procedure. Such an impact statement should include a considered analysis of the economic, social, environmental and practical impact of a proposed law. We should never forget that the regulation we impose on industry invariably results in the imposition of compliance costs. As a Liberal, I believe in minimal government interference and that the role of government is to create and maintain a regulatory and taxing environment conducive to allowing the private sector to get on with the job. We must therefore be cautious when considering new legislation and the consequences flowing from it, and we should not inhibit business with unnecessary red tape. There may well be merit in the argument that lawmakers should only introduce a new regulation if at the same time they remove a redundant or superseded one. Of course, it is imperative that in seizing the opportunities and benefits that flow from economic activity, we must recognise the social and environmental impact on local communities of actions taken by industry. The concept of the community licence to operate and the obligations flowing from this should be prevalent in decisions that we make affecting industry. We must work to cultivate a future that is not only economically and environmentally sustainable, but one that is also socially sustainable. As legislators, we should encourage industry to work with local communities in which they operate to ensure that, in conjunction with government, important services such as health and education are provided and, where possible, that local and Indigenous employment is promoted. On a recent visit to the iron ore town of Newman, I was pleased to note that BHP Billiton has established programs designed to support sustainable communities. I am also aware of similar programs being endorsed and implemented in Western Australia by Rio Tinto, Fortescue Metals and other mining companies. These companies should be commended for the work that they are doing. Government should encourage and enhance opportunities for industry support and participation in delivering services and benefits to local communities with special needs. Mr. President, it is well recognised that the most fundamental responsibility of a government is the security of its nation and its people. After the nation's security come the critical areas of health and education, followed by a myriad of other responsibilities which are demanded by the community and which are provided by both the government and the private sector. Financing these growing responsibilities demands efficient economic utilisation and management of both our human and natural resources. This requires the input of secure energy and water supplies, along with transport infrastructure to enable access to both domestic and export markets. It is clear to me that the two great challenges that will affect Australia's future potential will be the production of competitively priced energy and water. In Western Australia, it is the lack of competitively priced energy, in particular in the state's north, which must be addressed so that optimum return on our resources may be achieved. Given the events of recent months in Western Australia, it is clear that we do not have a generation system that is capable of guaranteeing the energy security that is critical to our growing needs. There is a need in relation to Western Australia to focus our efforts in developing bold, visionary policies that provide the incentives for industry to produce competitively priced energy and an adequate supply of water to accommodate the vast opportunities that exist across the state. A failure to adequately plan for long-term investment in these precious commodities will restrict the opportunities for growth in Western Australia and, as a consequence, will be detrimental to the national economy. Gas and oil located in the northwest of Western Australia, coal in the southwest and uranium deposits in the pastoral and remote regions can, with bipartisan support, be transformed into the energy chain. Currently, our gas is exported to support the energy demands of other nations with whom we actually compete in our domestic and global markets. There is significant potential for greater downstream mineral processing within Western Australia at locations close to the natural resource. The renewable energy options of solar, wind, wave, tidal, geothermal and biomass are all relevant to Western Australia. What we require to promote the development of these natural resources and downstream processing opportunities is a visionary strategy which is underpinned and supported by a national development plan. I've had the opportunity of travelling throughout our vast Kimberley region, and I am convinced, given the huge coastal tidal movements, that tidal power represents a feasible energy option for the region. What is currently missing in the tidal energy option is the necessary start-up support at a national level, support which will be repaid many times over once tidal power is producing competitive energy. Apart from energy, the other great challenge is water. Where there is water, there can be